Once I thought I knew something, showed my hand and lost someone.
I was 32 years old when I handled the Frada case. There aren't that many times in a courtroom where kids have to testify, and you always try to avoid it. Even when they're the victim, you try to avoid it. You give the case away, you plea it out. This was different. I met you when you were just 7 years old. What do you remember about any of it? Anything?
All of it.
Do you really?
I mean, most of it, yeah.
Wow. In November of 1994, a very vivacious young lady named Farah Frada had just gotten her hair cut when she drove home, parked in her garage, and was surprised there by a man with a gun. Her neighbors heard gunshots, and Farah was evacuated by Lifeline to the hospital that night. It wasn't easy to piece together this horrible crime that left 3 young children without their mom. The investigators followed this trail that led through a whole bunch of pretty sketchy, shady characters, but it all led back to just one person. The first charges that were filed on this case made it land in my court. This was only my 6th death penalty case that I ever handled. We felt the need to use Farah's 7-year-old son on the witness stand to testify. My boss felt it was the wrong thing to do. As a brand new mother myself, and knowing how you feel about your baby, to ask any child to testify in a trial is a huge, horrible thing, maybe even scarring. Ultimately, we decided to do that. We felt like the evidence needed that to happen. This was the first big, different, crazy case that I ever handled. And a case that literally they wrote a book about, because you can't make up a case like this.
It's a Wednesday evening. My son Caleb was crying. I started to nurse him, and I'm sitting on my couch in my living room. Farah, who lived across the street, her garage door went open and the lights come on. And she's backing up into her driveway. And I hear a pop. I see Farah fall in her garage, and then I hear another pop. Immediately in my mind, I'm thinking she has boys are playing around. But I looked at my husband and said, if she doesn't get up in 2 seconds, I'm calling 911. And she didn't get up.
911 County, what is your emergency?
Yes, I just saw a shooting, please.
Okay, do you know if anybody's been shot?
Yes, I see the lady. I see her in her garage right now. She's been shot 2 times. There are 2 shots.
Passing motorist?
No, a guy in her garage waiting for her. I just saw his pants, and then I saw a black man, and he was dressed in black. And the lady's name is Farah. You need to send an ambulance. She's down.
In the midst of all of this, the lights in the garage go off. And I see this man come out from behind a tree, and he comes up to the road.
The suspect just got in the car that just pulled up. It was a silver car, I believe, with one burnt out headlight. The suspect just took off.
My husband started to go outside, and I was yelling at him not to go, but he's like, he has to check on her. He knelt down by her, and he could tell that she was still breathing, but she was shallow in her breast, like she was dying. Farah has 3 kids, and our concern is where are the kids? It was very hard to believe this was happening in our neighborhood, right in front of us.
I get the call to the crime scene. Grabbed Daniel Blomberg, who was a partner of mine. We are responding from the sheriff's office as the forensic investigation team. The initial report I get is that there is an adult female victim identified as Farah Frada. She's been shot. As I walked into the scene, garage doors open. I see the reporting deputies from the constable's office. And there's a bunch of what we in the unit call uh-oh blood. In other words, enough blood came out of the victim that it looks like she might not make it. And so at that point, the judgment is made that it's the right thing to do to fly her on the helicopter to the hospital. I get my partner started on photography, and I start looking around. I inventory the garage in the vicinity of what looks like where the crime took place. There's an automobile, there's bloodstains on the floor, there's medical refuse on the floor. I see a bunch of her property, purse and other items. And those items look like they're undisturbed. When you see that, well, it's not a robbery, most likely. I don't find any bullet casings. So kind of indicating to me they either cleaned them up or maybe used a revolver.
The first person that we want to talk to and try to rule out is the husband. We found out Robert Fratta was the husband of Farah Fratta, the woman that had been shot, but they were in the process of getting divorced.
Lots of neighbors had come out, and that's when Bob showed up. And the kids were in the car.
Bradley, the oldest, was 7, Daniel was 6, and Amber was 4 years old.
The scene was already taped off, and I just remember being approached by a lot of cops, and it was just a chaotic scene.
I went to the car and I said, Bob, don't let the kids out of the car. And Amber looked at me and she said, did something happen to my mommy? It's like they knew. That broke my heart.
That's when we start hearing something has happened. I didn't know what. I wanted to see my mother, but I was told that I couldn't see her right now. She is being transported to a hospital and that I could see her in the morning. My brother and sister were younger than me, so their reactions weren't much, but I didn't know what exactly was going on. And then when I heard that I was going to be staying with my grandparents that night, I was afraid.
At the crime scene, well, I'm talking to Robert. He was not asking questions that you would think someone would be asking when they find out that his wife and mother of his children has just been shot. He's focusing on telling the story about his alibi. Hey, I couldn't have done this. I was with my kids at church. Robert was asked to come to the homicide office for an interview. He's obviously works out. I guess you could call him a bodybuilder.
Have you ever been arrested?
No.
What type of work do you do?
Work for the city of Missouri City, combination firefighter, police officer.
You're a police officer?
Mm-hmm.
Can I see your ID?
I don't have it with me.
When one cop is interviewing another cop, they're aware that the person they're talking to knows all the rules. They know the game, they know the law, they know how to work all that to their advantage more than the typical suspect.
When you picked up your son at what time? Or your daughter, I'm sorry, Amber?
Amber was before 5 and the boys were about 5.
What'd you do with them?
Went to St. Mary's Church.
He told me that he had taken his children to church that night. He checked 2 of the children, the younger ones, into a nursery, and the oldest was preparing for his first communion.
Who hates your wife enough to?
Nobody I can think of. I mean, I can't think of anybody that hates her. All I can say is, check her lifestyle. She went out clubbing a lot, got a boob job and flaunted a lot.
It was obvious that he knew the procedures for interviews and interrogations. He was speaking freely the whole time, answering the questions and denying any involvement.
Did you arrange to have your wife killed?
No, I did not. I'll put it this way, too. I mean, if anything happens to her, what the hell am I going to do now? Me battling for custody was also relying on her to be paying me child support at $600 to $700 a month.
My interview with Robert, it just did not feel right. He didn't appear too troubled by what had just happened. It just makes me think, what is wrong with this guy? And that's just a clue that he's hiding something.
You know, I still, for some reason, I feel like she knew the person.
Robert's interview lasted 14 hours from the time he was brought down until the time he was released the next morning.
I remember Bob Fratta walking out of the sheriff's department where all the reporters are swarming him right after he's brought down to be interviewed. And he looks into that camera and does the whole, how do I look thing to the camera, like it's all a big fun game. Thinking, wow, your wife was just shot. You just took your children there and saw that, and you're up here today in your pretty blue jacket, shining for the camera.
He had an alibi, but I think Robert was involved in this somehow. He had this alternate lifestyle.
What he was doing was not normal.
That's when he decided he had to take care of Farah. She knew Farah, and she knew it was going to happen, and she didn't do one thing to stop it from happening.
The next morning, we woke up to my grandmother waking us up in bed and telling us that our mother had died. There wasn't anything after that she would say that happened. She didn't tell us that my mother was murdered. I did not know exactly what happened. I did not know that she was shot, but I knew that she was no longer with us. And after that, probably for the next 2-3 hours, we just stayed in that bed and all cried.
So Lex and Betty Bacher, Farah's parents, took their grandchildren and they gave these 3 kids a home.
During the investigation, we spoke to some of Farah's friends so we could get a better idea of what was going on within the family.
I met Farah working at American Airlines. I actually worked in the office and she was a ticket agent. We were very good friends. We talked every day. Farah was very quiet, very shy. She's just sweet, good person. Farah's family came here from the UK. She started working for American Airlines, and that's how she met Bob. He was a ticket agent too, and they seemed to hit it off. He could charm the pants off anybody. They had a great time together. They had 3 beautiful kids, and they were happy. It didn't start falling apart till later. It took a while because Bob put up a good front, but he was actually very selfish, all about him, even when it came to the kids. And then Bob was abusive to Farah, but not physically. He knew her weaknesses. Bob knew that Farah was insecure about her body. He latched onto her insecurities and made them worse. I mean, it's one of the reasons why she got breast implants.
So then she not only just wanted to divorce him, she wanted the kids and custody, him to pay child support. They were fighting over 3 children, and they were fighting over the money and property. During the divorce, Farah was deposed, and some really nasty, ugly things had finally been spoken publicly about Bob Fratta for the first time.
The divorce proceedings revealed that Robert had this alternate lifestyle. That he would go to some seedy areas of Houston, that he liked to frequent topless clubs, leather bars, that sort of thing. He preferred very kinky sex.
That kind of sex is what he really liked, and he wanted her to do that. And she had told other people she was disgusted by it and couldn't do it anymore. She was ready for that part of her life to be over with.
A lot of Robert's life revolved around the gym. So we spoke to people at the gym. We found out that Robert was telling them about the difficulties he was having at home. He would also tell them how he was getting ready to lose everything because of this divorce. Robert was not happy about it, that he was concerned that he would not have any money, that he would be broke, that he would have to pay child support. And that's when we found out that he was asking people if they knew anybody that would kill her for him.
Law enforcement learned Bob Fratta approached a lot of people about, do you know somebody that can kill my wife? Hey, I got some extra money. Do you want to kill my wife? No one knew how serious to take him.
Most people that knew Bob knew he talked a lot. They thought that he was not serious about it, that he was blowing steam. When we found out that Robert's alibi was at St. Mary's, we went there and questioned employees and other people that were at the church that night. We found out that he was acting very strange. Getting up to make phone calls. It got to the point where employees of the church were getting angry with him because he was answering the phone instead of letting church staff answer the phone, like he was expecting phone calls.
Law enforcement talked to Bradley. Bradley had a great memory. Bradley remembered that night that Daddy was on the phone at church, that Daddy didn't usually even come into church when they went to catechism, but he did that night.
We asked for the toll records from St. Mary's. I wanted to see who he was calling or who was calling into the church.
Bradley remembered that Bob took all three of the kids to Wyatt's cafeteria after church. He even remembered his daddy using the payphone there.
While eating there, 2 times at least, to my knowledge, left us sitting in the booth and went to a payphone to make phone calls.
When we received the toll records from St. Mary's, a woman named Mary Gipp came up. We found out that calls were being made from the church to Mary Gipp's phone and from Mary Gipp's phone to the church. And also calls were going to a pager, which was registered to Mary Gipp.
The detectives were also able to identify calls made from Mary Gipp's phone to Wyatt's cafeteria that night.
And the calls were coming in about the time that Farah was killed.
The question is, who's Mary Gipp? And could she be involved with the murder of Farah Fratta?
Mary Gipp was contacted by detectives and questioned, but Mary was reluctant to talk. She did not offer any information about calls with Robert Fratta the night of the murder.
The detectives know that her phone is involved around the time of the murder, but they don't really know what that means. She didn't want to admit she knew anything. She balked, she stalled, she did everything she could to avoid helping law enforcement. But there's nothing to arrest her for at this point. So the detectives needed to figure out a way to get Mary Gipp to want to talk to him.
We found out that calls from Robert Fratta during the time that this murder occurred were going to a phone and to a pager registered to Mary Gipp. But Mary was reluctant to talk about the murder.
If you think someone really does know more information, you can play the hardball game where you threaten to take them to a grand jury, threaten to file charges. So in exchange for immunity, Mary Gipp agrees to tell the sheriff's department everything she knows, to cooperate completely, and to testify. She tells them that she's in a serious relationship with a man named Joe Price-Stash. They were living together in an apartment. She then says that Bob and Joe Price-Stash met at the gym, where she also went. They all knew each other. And that at some point, Bob Fratta approached Joe Price-Stash at that gym about, do you know somebody that can kill my wife?
We learned from Mary Gipp that he was offered $2,000 in a Jeep to do it. Joseph Price-Stash agreed to carry out the murder.
But the sheriff's office knew that Joe Price-Stash wasn't going to be the shooter because the shooter is a black male. Joe Price-Stash was the getaway driver because he drove his car that night that had a burnt-out headlight. Mary Gipp told the sheriff's department that their neighbor, Howard Guidry, was the person who shot Farah Fratta. Mary Gipp knew it was about to go down, yet she didn't call one person and warn them. Not Farah, not the police, not anybody. She let it happen.
Mary Gipp told us that after the murder, Price-Stash came back home and brought the weapon. During that time, Mary wrote down the serial number of the weapon, which was a .38 revolver. And she decides, hey, my insurance for me to stay out of trouble is to jot down this information.
4 months after the murder, law enforcement discovers the serial number was linked to a .38 Smith & Wesson, and law enforcement already had the gun in evidence.
In March of '95, there was a robbery at the Klein Bank.
Howard Guidry was involved in the Klein Bank robbery. He got caught and arrested, and he had that gun in his backpack. which led to being able to identify that weapon as being the murder weapon that killed Farrah Fradda. They run the serial number on the gun through ATF, and it comes back registered to Bob Fradda.
On March 8th, 1995, Howard Guidry was brought to the office for an interview and gave a full confession. Price Stash gave him the gun. The plan was to drop him off at the Fradda house, wait until Farrah came home and shoot her, and that Price Stash would come pick him up and they would make their getaway.
Joe Price Stash was arrested. He was brought in and interviewed, and he admitted his involvement. We have the murder weapon. We have Mary Gipp. We know of the involvement of Joe Price Stash and Howard Guidry. We know that Bob Fradda is the one pulling all the strings and masterminding all this. It's time to get all three of them indicted for capital murder because it's a murder for hire. A murder for hire is a special kind of murder under Texas law, and anyone involved, middleman, triggerman, hirer, are all guilty of the same thing, capital murder, and they can all three get the death penalty.
I was on the couch playing a board game. My grandparents were watching the news, and all of a sudden my father pops up on TV in handcuffs. I still at that time did not know it was because of what he did to my mother. What I felt at that time was curiousness. Why is it going on?
Bob Fradda, Joe Price Stash, and Howard Guidry were all indicted for the capital murder of Farrah Fradda. I was a chief in the 230th District Court. I was a pretty new chief. I was only 32 years old. I was pregnant with my second child. This turned out to be the 6th death penalty case that I handled. So I was new, I was young, I was just learning everything back then. So you have 3 defendants. Often, prosecutors would pick to try the shooter first. In most people's minds, they're the worst one. In my mind, the worst person here is Bob Fradda. He's the mastermind and he's a cop. We tried Bob Fradda first. We went into it knowing his would be the most difficult, though the evidence wasn't as obvious and simple for him because he's not the shooter. So the case against Bob Fradda was circumstantial. You don't have a confession. There was no videotape. There was no eyewitness. And that was the risk. That was the concern. Bob Fradda's on trial for the murder of his wife, Farrah Fradda. My job is to show the jury that divorce is the motive and to try and make them see the pieces of the story that prove that Bob, even though he wasn't there that night and he truly was alibied, was in charge of the whole thing that went down. The thing that I think drove Bob over the edge to find someone to kill his wife is that in their very nasty divorce, Farrah was deposed in a law office, not in a courtroom. And for the first time, she acknowledged what was going on in their sex life, things that he made her do, and that he's a sexual deviant.
We found out that Robert preferred to have people defecating on him during sex.
Bob was sick. What he was doing was not normal. She just couldn't handle it. Nobody could handle something like that.
So Bob and Farrah Fradda were fighting over custody of the 3 kids. They were fighting over money, and I think Bob Fradda was worried that his sexual desires were about to be made very, very public. That's when he decided he had to take care of Farrah. Bob Fradda had what a lot of people would call the perfect alibi. Catechism class for his kids during the window of the time of the murder. Bradley was 7, Daniel was 6, and Amber was 4. Even though there were other witnesses and ladies at the church that saw Bob Fradda that night, the only people that were with Bob Fradda the entire night were his 3 children. So my boss at the time, Casey O'Brien, and I went round and round about, but do we put his 7-year-old son on the witness stand in front of the jury to talk about his dad, who he loved, What would a jury think? Would they be so mad at us for doing that they wouldn't do their job? I didn't think so. In case you just felt it was the wrong thing to do. But Bob Fratta's never going to testify, so how am I going to prove Bob Fratta was taking all those phone calls at St. Mary's and Wyatt's Cafeteria that very night? Bradley was there, which is why we called him as a witness. He was so little, and he sits up there on the chair, and where do you think he looked? At his dad. And he looked at his dad almost the whole time. He would look over at me and answer the questions, but it was the first time he'd seen his dad in a very long time because Bob was in custody, and he didn't know what all this means. I doubt he knew that he was testifying against his father. The prosecutor part of me was coldly thinking, let's focus here. The mother part of me wanted to cry and just yank him off and take him out. I mean, look what he'd been through. He buried his mom, his life has changed, he's now living with his grandparents. He has no parents, and now he's testifying in a courtroom. Doesn't get worse than that. But he's answering my questions, and he remembered everything with hardly any hesitation or confusion. Bradley's testimony is the connecting dot between all the phone calls that Bob Fratta made that night from the church and from Wyatt's Cafeteria. The phone records show that those calls were all made from Bob Fratta to Joe Pricedash, who was using Mary Gipp's phone while he was with Howard Guidry on the night of the murder. We were able to match up 2 phone calls that went to the Wyatt's Cafeteria where Bob Fratta was the night of the murder. One call came before the shooting and one came after. The defense didn't have a lot of cross-examination questions for Bradley. There's no way anybody could ever think that he was making it up or lying, not in that little boy voice the way he said it. And I think that he broke the jury's heart. Hi, Bradley.
I can.
Can I give you a hug?
Yeah, absolutely.
You still look the same.
You do
really
too. You look better.
Wow, you look so good. You look so young.
Thank you.
I was really dreading seeing Bradley. I wondered for so many years, how's he doing? How's he really doing? And I never reached out to him because I appreciate that anything having to do with me is a reminder of the worst thing in his life. I still, to this day, wonder how much impact that had on Bradley psychologically, or how he grew up dealing with the fact that he testified against his own father. We took a lot of criticism in Black for putting you on the stand.
I bet you did.
Having to go through all that as a baby, 7 years old.
I had no idea why I was answering these questions for you.
Right.
I had no idea that my dad was the one being charged, so I'm pretty sure I smiled at him when I looked at him.
And you went like this?
Yep, I remember I waved.
The crucial part of connecting your dad to the scene was all those phone calls.
Yes, ma'am. I remember being at church that night. I remember him walking away from us multiple times to use the phone. I remember specifically 2 times at Wyatt's Cafe, him leaving us at the booth that we were at to go use the payphone.
Did you ever, in the years since then, when you got older, wonder why legally we made you do that, I made you do that? Did you ever wonder that?
It was needed, I know it. All I want was justice for my mother, and I wanted the truth. And if that had to come out from me for people to know as well, then that's how it had to be. I appreciate you, is what I want you to know out of anything.
You're very sweet.
I said I wasn't gonna cry, but...
So did I. You mean a lot to a lot of us.
You mean a lot to my family. Thank you.
In most of the solicitations of capital murders that I've handled, the mastermind had to ask around a little bit or talk about it a little bit. Bob Fratta had a big mouth, and he was braggadocious. And at the gym is where he talked the most. He would try to get other people to help him out taking care of his wife. And we put those people on the stand, too. The defense countered, said it was literally locker room talk. All men say that about their wives when they're going through a divorce. Oh, come on, he was just kidding. But he did it to too many people, including at work where he was a cop, so that didn't really play. In every murder case, you have to put on someone who knows the victim to talk about the circumstances going on in Farah's life at that time. We already knew that we couldn't use Farah's dad because he was too angry. He lost his baby. He was mad. And we didn't think that Lex could keep it cool. We thought the safer play was to put Betty Backer on the stand, Farah's mom, because we thought she could handle it a little better. Betty gets on the stand. She's looking into the eyes of her son-in-law who killed her baby. And she lost it. Betty starts screaming at Bob and calling him a monster. The defense stands up, starts screaming, mistrial, mistrial. They're objecting. The judge is yelling at the jury, take him out, take him out. Oh boy, here we go. We put Betty Backer on the stand, Farah's mom, and she immediately starts screaming at Bob and calling him a monster. The defense stands up, starts screaming, mistrial, mistrial. It's bad, but you got to remember poor Betty. When Bob Frada got arrested, she saw it on TV. She's never been able to confront him with the knowledge that he killed her baby. And I'm trying to tell her, you got to be cool. You can't cry. Just answer my questions. Don't be rude. All the rules that we ask them to follow, they're hard. I really wonder how any family can ever keep it together. I'm pretty sure I would lose it. I'd be one of those people coming over the railing trying to get you. The judge yelled at her. He yelled at me, but denied the motion for a mistrial, told us to straighten it up, and we started again. After we set up the weeks and days that led to Farah Frada's murder, we get to the actual plan that they actually carried out the day of the murder. It was important for the jury to understand that Bob, even though he wasn't there that night, was in charge of the whole thing that went down. And Joe Price-Dash, at the time his serious girlfriend, was Mary Gibb. She is a hugely important witness for this case. In Texas, you need to be guilty of helping commit the offense of capital murder. Mary Gibb didn't do that. She was aware it was going on, but she did not help the capital murder happen. She's the connect-the-dot witness between Joe Price-Dash to Howard Guidry to Bob Frada. Mary Gibb made me sick. I couldn't stand her. She knew Farah, and she knew it was going to happen, and she didn't do one thing to stop it from happening. You try to always judge your witness through the lens of a juror, because that's what counts, their vote. A juror doesn't care about my legal requirements. They just know how they feel. So I appreciated a jury's going to hate her. And I said that in opening statement. My line was, you're going to meet a lady that you can't stand. She's going to make you sick to your stomach, and she's going to disgust you. Even if you hate her, you still have to believe her. The main thing we were worried about was, does she come across as credible enough for a jury to believe she's telling the truth? Mary Gibb testifies that on November the 9th, 1994, she sees Joe Price-Dash get dressed all in black, walk out the door, and tells her he's going to go pick up Howard Guidry. She knows why they're leaving and what they're leaving for. She remembers that Joe Price-Dash comes back home. He tells her it's done. He had that gun, that .38, so she was able to write down the serial number to that .38 that was used because she knew that what they were doing was wrong. And she anticipated that one day law enforcement was going to need that information.
There's one person that I will never, ever forgive, and that's Mary Gibb.
I understand.
I know that she knew what was going to happen.
And she didn't do a damn thing.
She didn't do a damn thing.
She didn't pick up the phone and call anybody, and she didn't try to stop it. And she has to live with it every day, knowing what a horrible, selfish, weak person she is.
I guess that's punishment enough.
I think her life has been pretty horrible ever since that day. All the consequences, right?
Yeah.
Her whole life is different because of it.
Yeah.
When Mary Gibb testified, the defense was kind of in a quandary because they wanted to attack her character with the whole, you're a lousy human being because you knew this was going to happen and you did nothing. But if you do that, you're acknowledging that everybody knew it was going to happen and they still participated in it. They also tried to discredit her because she stayed with Joe Price-Dash even after she knew what he did and what he was capable of. The defense cross-examination wasn't effective enough to undermine her credibility, in my opinion. So when she got off the witness stand, I remember thinking, yes, she did a good job. The defense's final argument was a compilation of all of our evidence is just circumstantial, and they tried to undermine the credibility of Mary Gipp. They made the argument that that night at church, when his alibi was catechism for the kids and he was on the phone a lot, what's the big deal? Bob's always on the phone. That doesn't mean he was communicating about her murder that night. And the most important argument they made is that because there was an eyewitness to the shooting, we all know that Bob Fratto wasn't the shooter because that was a black male. In our closing argument, we were telling the jury again why we put on each and every witness and what the point of their testimony was. We talked about the divorce and the trigger, the fact that the world is fixing to know what a sick bastard Bob Fratto is, in addition to the custody and all the rest of his controlling issues. And in the whole wide world, who in the world will want Farrah Fratto dead but Bob? If you're not the trigger man, but you provide the weapon, you're assisting. If you're encouraging someone to do it by giving them money like Bob Fratto, that makes you a party, an accomplice. We want the jury to understand that even though he wasn't there and he was smart enough to use some fools to do it for him, don't let him get away with it. He's the puppeteer here. He's the mastermind here. Hold him accountable. He's guilty of capital murder. The jury goes out to deliberate guilt. If Bob Fratto is not found guilty, then what do you do with the other two? After less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found Robert Fratto guilty of capital murder. It is always satisfying when a jury comes to such a quick verdict because they see the evidence the same way we do.
I was not in court when the verdict came in. I'm at my grandparents' house, and my grandfather comes with my grandmother and sits all three of us down, and he proceeds to tell us that our father is responsible for our mother's death, and that our father was going to be going away as well. We were never going to see him again. I couldn't process my father had someone kill my mother. I still looked at my father like he's my father, you know, and I'm still trying to understand why or if this is even real. But at that time, I turned on my father. He was responsible for my mother's death. He's behind bars, and anger came towards him, and just basically running through my mind with the question, why?
Now, to me, the real trial begins. Was he going to get the ultimate punishment in the state of Texas? And that's the death penalty.
The same jury is asked to go back there and vote. Does the defendant get the death penalty by answering these questions? Is he a future threat? And is life more warranted than the death penalty? Here was the challenge in this case. Bob Fratto was not the shooter. And him being a cop and a first offender, would that make just one juror decide, okay, he doesn't need the death penalty? And if they decided that one juror, then we've lost the death penalty. The jury came back with a punishment verdict, and it didn't take them very long.
It was a bittersweet moment for the family of Farrah Fratto. On this day, family members watched as her husband was sentenced to die for arranging the murder.
The heinousness of this crime, the planning and the premeditation and the kind of man that he is, he deserved the death penalty.
Besides just knowing that he's guilty, what about the fact that his punishment was the death penalty?
I liked it at first when I was younger. As I grew older, I thought, you know, I don't care if he would just sit in jail for the rest of his life, to be honest with you.
In 1994, we did not have life without parole. So had your dad gotten a life sentence, it would have been a life sentence for 1 day. He would have been eligible for parole. So that was the choice the jury had, life and death, okay? The next case we tried was Joe Price-Dash's, and his jury also gave him the death penalty. The last case we tried was Howard Guidry's case, and again, the jury gave him the death penalty. Every single person involved in committing this crime received the death penalty, and that's the only case that I know of in the United States of America where that's happened. What do you remember about your mom?
I have specific memories that I can remember You know, us going to the pool or her working out, just little things.
Remember how pretty she was?
Yeah.
Okay. At one point, you tried to, like, reach out to your dad and talk to him, okay?
I went and saw him, my brother and I.
When?
When I was 18, and my brother was 16 or 17.
So y'all went to death row to see him?
Uh-huh.
Wow, tell me about that.
I just wanted to hear, maybe he would confess to me.
Or
maybe
say he's sorry.
Sorry or anything, but he just constantly wanted to say he's innocent.
How much time did your dad spend asking about y'all?
It wasn't much.
Okay.
I mean, it was honestly just him trying to convince us that he's behind bars for no reason.
I've never been to an execution. You went, huh?
As long as I can remember, I knew I wanted to go.
Did he say anything to you?
Nothing.
He didn't?
No.
Did he say anything at all?
They asked him if he had any last words, and he said no.
Really?
That was it.
Okay. Wow.
I think I really have one question for you. Like, you are 100% certain it was Bob.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. That's all I wanted to ask you.
Bradley.
That's it.
There's no doubt about it. When Bradley asked, "Are you sure my dad did it?" I tried not to let it show on my face, but I was like, I wanted to cry and I wanted to scream. Deep down in his heart, he's still that little boy whose daddy killed his mom. And that's a horrible thing to have to accept, and you just don't want to ever believe it, do you? Thank you. Tell your brother and sister and grandma and Zane, okay? I'm proud of you.
Thank you.
Your mom will be very proud of
I know. I know she is. Thank you, Kelly.
Yes, you're
Thank you
welcome.
for everything.
Thank you. I learned so much from this horrible crime. I learned about what divorces do to people. And also, everybody knows that most cops are there for the right reason. But this case reminds us all that there are bad cops. And when you have a bad cop, that can be a really difficult case to have to handle. This case, too, reminds you when people say things like, "Hey, do you know anybody that'll help me kill my wife?" Take it seriously. Call them out on it. Do something. If one of those people that Bob Bratta popped off to had said something, Farah would still be alive today.
In the quiet city of Temecula, California, the disappearance of Edna Rivers sends ripples of concern through her community.
Her vehicle was found in the Pechanga Casino parking lot, and there was blood handprints on one of the windows. There was a significant odor of what appeared to be flesh, a decaying flesh. So yeah, that really lit everybody up then.
So she was scheduled to work on January 2nd. She did not arrive.
I was very surprised at the demeanor the family had, from the kids all the way up to the in-laws, that this woman's missing and no one really cares about her.
When the authorities reach out to her family, their response is indifferent. They claim that Edna had a habit of vanishing for a few days. But those who know her aren't convinced.
And yet the family is just going on with their regular routine.
It's been 48 hours since the report of her disappearance, but there is still no sign of Edna Rivers. The clock is now ticking.
Temecula is a middle to upper class community located in southwest Riverside County. It started out basically more of almost a suburb, a commuter town from San Diego, Orange County, with the house prices were much cheaper at one point in time in the area. So many people would commute from the San Diego and Orange County area.
As a suburban community, the crime rate in Temecula is fairly low, and people just don't expect to have crime where they are in Temecula. It's a beautiful suburb and people feel very safe. Edna worked in a nursing home and worked nights.
So she was scheduled to work on January 2nd at 10 or 10:30 in the evening. She did not arrive.
She worked there for almost a year and never called in sick or never missed a day. So for her not to call in or not to show up was unusual.
They described her as the type of employee that if she thought she may be late, she would call. And she was extremely dependable. So they were very worried when she didn't show up.
Edna's sister, she was very upset and very motivated to find out where her sister had gone to, because it's not like her to disappear, and yet the family is just going on with their regular routine.
Edna's sister, in fact, called her work on Monday evening asking if she had been there. But one thing that I thought was unusual about this is the sister asked the coworkers not to tell Philip she called. I think that shows the dynamic of their relationship, that the sister was even concerned to let Philip know she was looking for her.
Philip Charles Rivers was a Navy serviceman who was stationed in San Diego, and at the time was going through a bitter divorce from his wife, Edna. As often happens, even though a couple is going through a divorce, one of the people refuses to leave, or it just isn't practical for them to leave. So while they're going through the process, the couple continues to live together. And that really could be a situation that becomes a catalyst. A few of the factors that affected their decision to divorce was the fact that Edna would disappear for days at a time and go on these gambling binges, which caused a lot of resentment for Philip, and there was a lot of jealousy.
He spent his career, most of his adult life, in the Navy. He was assigned to a vessel and was deployed on a regular basis.
He lived in a upper scale, middle class, gated community in Temecula.
But Edna Rivers is first reported missing by her employers at the nursing home, following concerns that she had not turned up for work. Police arranged for a welfare check.
The deputy who responded to the residents said she wasn't there, went to the school and talked to her daughter, Vanessa, and Vanessa said, we don't know where she is.
When the detectives went to that house to check the welfare again, but now the detectives went and they contacted the family that was there. They went into the room. They stated, "Oh, excuse the odor. She cooks up here with spices, and that's why we have the incense burning."
Several of her co-workers independently called on Monday to try to find her. Again, her house and cell phone, no response. Adults can leave. An adult can go anywhere they want to. This is not a missing juvenile. This is not what we call a dependent adult who has medical conditions. This is an adult who can, if they want, walk away from their family. They're allowed to do that. I spoke with one coworker who explained to me that she spoke with Edna on the 1st and explained that Philip had been arrested. He had done something to her charging cord to her cell phone, and she didn't know how to get another cord. This coworker explained that she had another charger. Edna came by her house around 4 o'clock in the afternoon and picked up the phone charger. To my knowledge, that's the last time anyone besides Philip saw her alive.
We got briefed by the detectives and they told us, well, missing person, there was a couple welfare checks done at the house, nothing was going on, and they said the husband, Philip Rivers, was actually arrested.
He gets arrested, I believe, on January 1st for assault on his wife.
They were sleeping in separate rooms. She went into his room, grabbed a cell phone charger because he had control over the charger. That causes an argument. We heard that when we interviewed the kids. The kids told us that. And that ended up from an argument to him assaulting her. And she actually was in the process of getting a divorce from him. So she calls her attorney and screaming and yelling on the phone saying, Philip has just assaulted me. The attorney advises her, hang up, call 911. So she hangs up, calls 911, and the sheriff's department shows up. She says he assaulted me, and she makes the citizen arrest and have him arrested.
Subsequent to that, his parents bail him out, and several hours later. So yeah, he's they're tight with him. and the daughters, but not so much the wife. The wife is kind of alienated by everyone in the household.
They bring him back to the house, which was very bizarre. You know, he was probably told, and procedure is, you just don't go back. You were just arrested for domestic violence. You don't go back to the same house, especially if the other spouse is there. The jail did the procedure where domestic violence, they end up calling the victim saying the person is being bailed out or the person is being released from custody, just to let you know. So she knew he was being released. He ends up going back to the house with his parents. The two daughters are at the house. He ends up calling the daughters, telling them, pack up some clothes. You're going to spend a couple of days at the grandma and grandpa's house. So when they arrive, Edna is in her room. Philip comes in, packed up everything, and they left with the parents. They left in two cars, the grandparents, their vehicle, and Philip left in his car. They went over to his parents' house.
Their information was at first very tentative. They didn't want to really give a lot of information. They hadn't listed her as a missing person, as I recall, and that was a little strange.
Philip finally reports her missing on January 5th, and that's because the sheriff's department contacted him and asked him, you know, where's your wife? We're getting a lot of calls. Check the welfare, your wife's missing. She's not showing up at work. Her cell phone's not working, and no one could get a hold of her. And he makes up an excuse saying, oh, she must have left. I want to report her missing.
With a missing persons report officially filed, Detective Darren Gray reaches out to Edna's attorney, hoping to shed light on her personal life and the mounting tensions within her family.
I went and spoke with her attorney. He went over the details of that week with me, the phone calls that he received, the conversations he had with Mr. Rivers in the past when he called irate. He was very concerned about his client. He also gave me a copy of a check that she had given him for payment. With that information, I contacted her bank, which was Washington Mutual, and they were able to tell me there had been no activity from her checking account since January 1st, which was a big deal to me. Now we have someone who is extremely dependable, who has children, who's not been seen from, and we have no banking activity.
It is at this point that detectives start to prioritize Edna's estranged husband, Philip Rivers, as a person of interest in the case of her disappearance.
Well, we were hearing that within those 15 years of marriage, it was a rocky marriage, a lot of issues, arguments, domestic issues that weren't reported.
We were able to get access from her cell phone provider, and they told us there were no outgoing calls since January 1st. Several detectives and I tried going by the house on the 6th, and there was no answer. Spoke to several neighbors, and they told us that Edna was not there. They hadn't seen her car in several days. And so then a plan was made to try to contact Rivers on the 7th, being Friday. Throughout my investigation, I was speaking with two agents from NCIS, and they in turn were speaking to his command. We didn't know where he was going to be, and I didn't want that. Time was important. To number one, find out if Edna was okay, and number two, if there's a crime scene, we don't want the crime scene to deteriorate. We want to get as much evidence, physical evidence, as we can, so we need to locate that crime scene. So I had NCIS contact his command, and he was ordered to report to his duty station on his ship on Friday at 8 o'clock in the morning. He didn't show up, which was a big red flag to everyone. You know, this is a career Navy man. Why is he not showing up? He ends up arriving at 10, 2 hours late, which is very unusual for him, but with no explanation given when he was late. He was then directed to go to the office of NCIS, which is where I was located. Once he got there, I introduced myself, and I explained to him that I was there for the purpose of a missing person investigation. I wanted to find his wife, and the best way for me to do that was to get as much information from him as I could. And he agreed. He wanted to help. He did not know where she was. So he agreed to speak with me so we could find out where his wife was located.
I was very shocked. I was very shocked at the demeanor of everyone, even the kids, that mom is gone. No one cared. Mom is missing. No one cared.
So I asked him to prepare a written statement for me, which took him about 35 to 40 minutes. And I asked him to review everything from the last time he saw her until today. At one point, I step out and I take a break, and I speak with some fellow detectives. All of this was, of course, coordinated. Things aren't just happening. So a group of detectives had gone to the house and spoken to one of the daughters. And she explained that her mother and father lived in separate bedrooms, and that her mother's room was normally locked. It's not now, and that the room had been recently painted, and the carpet had been cleaned in her room, which was a huge issue to me.
As concerns grow and more troubling details surface, detectives secure a search warrant for the Rivers home. They hope to uncover critical clues which may explain her mysterious disappearance. What they find inside will change the course of the investigation. 5th of January 2005, Temecula, California. 49-year-old Edna Rivers has been missing for 5 days. Estranged husband, Navy officer Philip Rivers, has been identified as a person of interest in her disappearance. Detectives have a search warrant for the family home.
Well, once we execute the search warrant, the residence is empty, no one's there. We start searching. We go to each room. We find out, okay, this is her room. She's living separate. And we get that from the background from what the investigators are telling us from Temecula. So we go process her room. The room is nice. The room is very tidy, like it's too clean. There's some stuff scattered here and there, but it's for someone that's gonna just take off or someone that's just gonna leave, it's way too neat. So we pull the rug up, and sure enough, we find a big blood stain underneath the rug. After finding the blood, we start looking at the walls. We could see there's blood splatter on the walls, even though the walls look like they were just painted. There's blood splatter on the furniture on the nightstand. Someone who cleaned up missed a lot of blood splatter on that. So we actually, okay, now we found the crime scene. Something did happen there. There's a lot of blood.
There's a smell that you get used to as a police officer, as a detective, of death. You know when you walk into a room if someone's dead in the room. It's in a sense like burnt popcorn. When you smell burnt popcorn, you know it's burnt popcorn. When an investigator walks into a room, you know if someone's dead or has been dead in there. And it was obvious when you walked in the house that someone had died in the room. And when pulling back the carpet, the subfloor was completely soaked with blood, which to me indicated she died in that corner and was left there for quite a while he figured out what to do.
So we continue talking to him, and we're interviewing him, and interviewing him very strong, very to the point, because we have already enough evidence that we're getting a good picture of what happened. Why didn't you report her missing? Everyone's calling her, everyone's trying to find where she's at, but you don't really care. He says, well, she takes a lot of trips. She has a gambling problem. Maybe her boyfriend, she met someone at the casino. Maybe, he's the one that kidnapped her, and, he's making up all these different stories that, shine us away from him.
One of the things that really irked Philip was the fact that Edna liked to gamble. Not only did she gamble, but she would bring their kids to the casinos to gamble with her, and that really upset him.
Well, he mentioned he went to Walmart in Hemet because he'd stayed in Hemet from the 1st to the 2nd and didn't purchase anything, but wandered around for about an hour. I thought this was unusual because why on a Sunday morning do you wander around Walmart for an hour and not purchase anything. He said it was to compare the price of a scooter he'd purchased his daughter for Christmas. He then stated that he went home on the 2nd. Edna's car was in the driveway, so he went to Pechanga. Pechanga is a casino located very close to their residence. I got him to commit to how much money he spent, what type of table he played blackjack on, things like that. Things that I knew the security people at Pechanga could find. And they were unable to locate him in Pechanga at all. And if you can't be honest about what you're doing on a Sunday morning during the investigation of your wife's disappearance, that's a very big indicator that you're involved in her disappearance.
Just days after she's reported missing, Edna's vehicle is found abandoned at the Pechanga Casino, less than 3 miles from her home. The discovery raises alarm. Investigators fear the worst, that Edna might never come home.
Her vehicle was found in the Pechanga Casino parking lot, and there was blood handprints on one of the windows. There was a significant odor of what appeared to be flesh, a decaying flesh. So yeah, that really lit everybody up then.
She was a frequent visitor at the casino, but they didn't find, she didn't have her card that she usually puts in the machine to play the games, to get those points, reward points. Her card was there, but she never went into the casino that we could find in the surveillance cameras, or where they could find the surveillance cameras. She was never in that casino at all.
It's close to their residence, and it's a big parking lot. It's a very easy location for a car to get lost. Unfortunately, the parking lot video at that time, is a far corner, and a camera was not directly at it, so you couldn't see who dropped it off or the time frame. So at that point, Central Homicide was involved with interviewing him, and they felt there was enough to put him in custody for the murder of Edna Rivers.
With Edna's estranged husband, Philip Rivers, in custody for her murder, it is a matter of days later that her body is finally located, 70 miles away from the family home in San Bernardino County.
It was a ranger checking the gates up in that area, fire gates, the fire roads, and he ended up finding the body out there that was probably dumped there.
Normally, once they were identified, San Bernardino County Sheriff got a hold of our department and let us know that this person was missing out of Temecula. And she'd been previously a victim of violence, domestic violence, perpetrated by her husband just a few days prior. Again, it's been my experience that we're going to look at the husband because of the domestic violence that occurred just recently.
With mounting evidence pointing towards foul play, investigators begin to put increasing pressure on Philip Rivers, pressing him harder, determined to find out the truth about what happened to Edna.
Sitting here thinking, okay, your wife is missing, you come home and there's all this blood all over the place and you're just not reporting it. And one thing he told us was, and I got rid of the bed that she was on. I cut up the mattress and I dumped them in different garbage bins all over the place. Yeah, during that time we were talking to him, I did notify him that his wife's body was found. He had no reaction to it. To him, it was kind of like, okay. He knew when we were talking to him as we were going on, interviewing him, he knew he killed her.
Once law enforcement got back to the residence and they realized that they obviously had a homicide and the number one suspect was going to be Philip Rivers, they got in and in that case, they seen that new linens were on beds, new beds in general, just a lot of cover-up. You could just tell that a lot of significant changes in just a few days.
We look at them and I tell them, it looked like someone cleaned the carpet. Well, I'm selling the house and I need to get the carpets clean and paint the walls and, paint the room. And I said, and you started in your wife's room? From all the rooms you did, you started in your wife's room? And he just kind of yeah. And then he changed the story and says, I came home after I dropped the kids off and everything, and I went to go talk to Edna, my wife, and there was a lot of blood on the carpet. There was a lot of blood. Okay. There was blood on the bed. And why didn't you call the police? I got scared. I was scared, so I just started cleaning up everything. I ended up getting a carpet cleaner from Stater Brothers, renting a carpet cleaner from there.
Later on, I ended up receiving a phone call from a woman whose son went to school with one of the Rivers children. He had come home from school and mentioned the arrest of Philip because it was discussed in class. She looked at the article and read it, and the reason she wanted to call is because she explained that she was at the Stater Brothers when the rug doctor used to clean the crime scene was rented. While she was online, she thought it was strange that somebody would be renting a rug doctor so early in the morning when it's raining. The belief that she had as she exchanged conversation with someone else in line is, well, they must have had a big New Year's Eve party and need to clean up. It was something that definitely stood out to her. She was able to describe the two individuals as male. She described one as older, which we later determined was Mr. Philip Rivers' father. And it just stood out to her as this rug doctor being rented at such a strange time. And then later sees that he was arrested for this.
His mother was interviewed. Her statement was inconsistent with what her husband said. And when she got caught in that inconsistent or a lie, her facial expression was, she was shocked, or she was very, like, oh, I got caught lying. His father was the same thing. He was interviewed by the station detectives and then later re-interviewed by us. During that time, we were ready. We found video of them purchasing the carpet cleaner at Stater Brothers. They went to Big Lots and they purchased a bed, a mattress. They were both together, father and son. Dad was like, well, I was helping my son. He was going to sell the house. So I just obviously went to help him buy the paint and to clean up the house.
They were all going to get together and sell the house. Yeah, the kids were going to assist, and mom and dad were going to help, and yeah, just regular family endeavor.
Someone who cleans the carpet doesn't stop to think that blood seeps down and saturates the backing and then will transfer to the padding and the floor below it. So this is not uncommon to find a crime scene with a carpet or a mattress or a blanket or some type of material that will hold blood.
The reason that the walls were painted is there was a large amount of blood spatter across the walls, which would indicate that she was struck multiple times. One blow doesn't cause blood splatter. You need multiple blows for there to be blood, and then the object to strike again to cause the spatter. So this indicated that she'd been struck multiple times, and what we found out from her body is those are obviously head wounds, and the head often bleeds much more than any other portion of the body, which is why she bled so much, and there was so much blood in the residence.
He just didn't beat her one time, beat her multiple times with an instrument to the head. We brought in some chemicals to spray on the walls, luminol to spray on the walls, and that brought up even all the blood splatter that was underneath the paint. We counted the different casts off, so it was multiple times that Edna was beat with that instrument.
The behavior of Edna's in-laws came into question. Were they more involved in the tragedy than anyone initially expected?
There's no evidence of him even talking to his parents, but his parents going along with, okay, let's go buy the carpet cleaner, let's go buy the bed, painting. I wouldn't know how to go about to explain how, I just killed my wife and, hey, Dad, could you come and help me paint the room? Could you help me clean the carpet? Blood, as mom's downstairs cooking dinner for everyone. There's no words to explain that.
That was unique. I've only seen that a couple of times where my family members actually assist the murderer. To be involved to that degree is beyond my comprehension, to say the least. They assisted in every way they could as far as the cleaning up the crime scene. Very hard to think about how that even works.
You normally don't get your parents to help you cover up your murder. And someone who, again, is very well respected in his profession. He's in the Navy. He should be someone who can handle pressure, who can handle stressful, intense situations, and remain calm, remain cool. He was unable to.
I think looking at the whole investigation and, analyzing the relationship and how it got to the point, I think what happened was he was a very controlling person, very jealous person. Edna felt very comfortable at her job, felt very independent, that I'm a woman, I have a work, I could do stuff by myself. I don't need to be controlled by a jealous, controlling husband. I think that kind of built up as times went on, as he saw her get more independent, the more he wanted to control her, and the more his parents interfered in their relationship. I think that kind of had a big part in it, that she would try to discipline the kids and try to bring them up, as any parent would do. No, you cannot do that, or no, you cannot go there. I think they interfered a lot in that relationship, got into their business that they never got into. I think all that was built up over the years, and then her filing for divorce, and they were going through procedure, and him thinking, I'm going to have to split that house with you. I'm going to have to give you 50-50 of this relationship, even though my parents gave us the money to buy this house and also make payments at times when they needed to make payments, house payments. He didn't want that. And I think that the last straw was when she had him arrested for domestic battery on her. I think that probably just was the end of it. And I think he just, at that point, decided, I'm going to kill her.
It's clear that Philip had a temper. He admitted to the police that he had pushed Edna back on January 1st when they responded to the home after the argument. That in itself could be considered violent behavior, and it very possibly could be considered premeditation. We're left wondering, was that the moment that he began to formulate this plan to do away with her?
The motives for this could be multiple things, from just the deterioration of their marriage and anger, or another call I received that was interesting. I received a call from a real estate agent. The real estate agent told me that he'd been involved in the initial sale of the house, or attempted sale, which was stopped by Edna's attorney because Edna was not listed on it. He told me that he had tried to make multiple phone calls or contact with Philip since he returned from a deployment and had never received a call back. Kind of forgot about it. On Thursday, January 6th, he suddenly received a call from Philip, who said he wanted to refinance or sell the house, and that the court had okayed it because they needed money for mental evaluations for Edna. Obviously, this was not the case. The court did not order that, and we know that Edna was deceased. My belief was he was trying to get money so he could flee the country. The standard deterioration of a relationship with a history of domestic violence, and then there's the financial aspect that he couldn't sell the house that he believed was his. He did not believe that any of the house belonged to her, which California state law says that it did, and he really had a hard time with that. I think all that came to a point with the anger over the deterioration of the relationship, the history of domestic violence, as well as this financial aspect of the house and the divorce proceedings.
He did had some counseling in the Navy. Once they kind of reported that there was some domestic issues there, he did go to talk to some counseling, but we never were able to get exactly what they talked about. We knew that he went to counseling. That's all they would tell us about that. He didn't like the independence of her leaving. She would go, according to him, she would leave for a couple of days and not come back. So that stuff would bring a lot of pressure into the family. That was one thing he brought up, where, she would go out or go to the Philippines for a long time and not tell anyone, or, go gambling for several days and not tell anyone and just show up whenever she wanted to.
As detectives explore potential motives behind Edna Rivers' murder, they begin piecing together a chilling sequence of events that took place inside the family home.
They're not usually whodunits. You had to prove that it happened. And in this case with Rivers, it was a matter of finding the victim's body eventually. And that was the hard thing to do in this situation. But we know that in the vast majority of cases, when a female is killed, it's usually the intimate partner who does it. And that's just what the statistics bear out. So in this situation, you had to put all those pieces together to show that she wasn't someone who just disappeared, that something happened to her. New Year's Eve is what brought this all about. Philip, I believe, was working on New Year's Eve and gone from the house. He had a 24-hour duty. Edna had a sister in the LA County area and wanted to take her daughters to a New Year's Eve party. One of the daughters did not want to go to the party. Philip's parents were at the house and an argument ensued where the parent supported the younger daughter that she did not have to go. This argument resulted in Edna calling her attorney for some advice. In speaking with her attorney, Edna would often call for advice, and he explained to me that she really often had a hard time making decisions and needed support in making decisions. The attorney spoke with the parents and explained that there was in fact a court order prohibiting the grandparents from being around the children. They weren't even supposed to be in the house or be around the children.
Edna did get a temporary restraining order against the parents, and they just ignored it, and she never enforced it. She never called the police or deputies out to enforce it. They're there for a reason, and it's a good reason. It's unfortunate, though, that people oftentimes ignore them and still contact the person that has the restraining order.
This conversation between the attorney and Philip's parents resulted in multiple phone calls from Philip to the attorney. The attorney described Philip's behavior as screaming and yelling or disrespecting his parents while he's serving our country. The attorney had to hang up on him 3 or 4 times because he continued to call and was irate. Edna decided to leave the house with just one of the daughters. She left to go to LA for this party, and on the way there, she received a call from her sister. Her sister said, "The weather's bad, turn around, go home," which she did. She had some paperwork she needed to drop off, and so she stopped at the attorney's office around 1 o'clock in the afternoon and left the paperwork with him. That was the last time the attorney ended up seeing her. And she ended up going home on New Year's Eve.
On New Year's Eve, he gets an argument with his wife over a cell phone charger. She goes in, grabs a charger, that causes an argument, and that ended up from an argument to him assaulting her. So she calls 911, and the sheriff's department shows up. She says he assaulted me, and she makes the citizen arrest and have him arrested.
And he's booked into the jail, and subsequent to that, his parents bail him out.
I believe what happened was when he came back, he got the kids, had the kids go to his parents' house, and he drove over there, and he's trying to, he's now, accounting for all his time. He drives over there. His parents now tells everyone, "Oh, I got called into work because the computer, is something wrong with the computer on the ship, and I'm the only one that knows how to work it." So he's already making an alibi. I believe after he dropped off the kids at the house, was there for a while, he drove back to his house and he killed his wife.
One of his coworkers, again, another man enlisted in the Navy, he called me out of the blue and explained that on a regular basis, Philip would talk about killing his wife. That he wanted to kill her. He went over plans, ways to kill her, ways to get away with it. So he was definitely not in a place of a joyful, happy marriage. What he was speaking to his coworkers about, how he could not wait to get back to see his wife after deployment. Completely opposite. He was talking on a regular basis about how he wanted her dead. There were times that Rivers would make allegations he spoke with me and other coworkers that he believed she may have had a boyfriend or been seeing somebody else. There was never any evidence of that came up through this investigation.
Not to scare the audience, but how many times, let's say a month, do we freely say, I could kill you, I'm going to kill you, and not really mean it. It's something that just slips out of our mouths. We certainly don't have that intent. But when you have a true murder where a husband has followed through and you question the people around him, including his coworkers, and they say that he voiced this desire to kill her, then those words really come home and sink you.
He was found guilty of homicide, and he was sentenced to 26 years to life. Father was tried. The jury was deadlocked, 10-2 favor of guilty. He was already in jail for about 2 years, so they decided not to pursue him.
The grandmother didn't get any prison term. They decided not to file on her.
Well, in this situation, we had 2 young girls, and we had the grandparents, who were obviously a dysfunctional portion of this relationship. And most importantly, they lost a relationship with both their parents. Their mother is, obviously deceased, and then their father goes to prison. Whether they choose to have a relationship with him or not, I don't know. But there's going to be an emotional toll from them losing contact with both of their parents. They're going to be now raised in a different environment. So there's just this ripple effect. How that impacts their life and all the people around them is what we never know. You throw a pebble into a pond and the ripples continue to go out and out. And a case like this is that rock in a pond, and it just destroys everything that it touches.
I don't think there's nothing she could have done besides going along with what Philip wanted, being a good wife, not having an opinion, doing whatever he wanted her to do, wanted him to do. Just have no opinion and just be the quiet little wife there. I don't think she could have avoided this.
But I believe that she really struggled with leaving her children. She didn't like the environment of the grandparents raising them and wanted to make sure she had as much custody of them as she could. And then through the divorce proceedings, obviously those things were going to minimize her contact with them, her time with the children. All of those things made it difficult for her to come forward with the allegations of domestic violence. She wasn't the kind to really be forceful in her needs. And I think those are reasons that probably kept her from in this relationship longer than she should have been in it. Speaking with Philip and spending much time with him as I did, I got the impression he was very calculating, very smart. And normally I would say he's not irrational.
No woman should be a victim of domestic violence. And she probably had enough of it, enough of being controlled in her life, enough of her husband being jealous of her going out or her being independent.
I think for him, the button was his wife. And who else can push your buttons but the person who knows you the most? And I think that's what happened, is she was able to push his buttons in a way that caused him to lose control. In other situations, I don't think anything like this would ever happen with him, but there was just this toxicity in their relationship that caused him to lose control. And that in no way is anything that Edna ever did. He is completely responsible for his actions in this situation. And that's not to take away, put any of this on her. It's all on him, and he is completely responsible for this.